I knew that I wanted to design sets in some form from an incredibly young age. I think I was about 8 years old, and I just was watching, you know, in those days, TV costume dramas, and I figured out somebody's making these worlds, and that's what I want to do. And it helped that my father was an art director, and so obviously I saw him in action. And I was just completely fascinated by what he did. And as a child, I used to help him paint his models and visit on set, and he was really against it. He actually didn't want me to go into the film industry at all. But in spite of that, here I am, and I've been a monomaniac about it all my life, and never diverted, actually. From a very young age, I sort of set out to do that. I wasn't sure if I actually did a postgrad. I did fine art at university. I went to Oxford because at the time I also had a place for modern languages, and my parents were trying to persuade me to do the modern languages. And instead I did fine art. And I've used the languages a lot on my travels in different locations. And then I did a postgrad course in theatre, and I did sets and costumes, and then I needed to earn some money. And in those days, the BBC still had this enormous design department, and I got myself a job as a design assistant at the BBC. And I stayed there for quite a short time, actually. I stayed there for only 3 years, and then because I realized it took quite a long time to work your way through the hierarchy, and I was a bit impatient. I had the arrogance of youth, for sure. And I just sort of I've never been terribly good at being told what to do. And so it was very clear to me that I kind of had to design and not be, I think I was a terrible assistant. I think I was actually really, really bad. I did quite a lot of set dressing, and I was getting some, at a kind of very young age, I was getting offers for set dressing. And I knew that if I continued doing that forever, it's a great job, but that would be me for the rest of it. You know, there isn't a natural crossover. So I realized that it was important early on to slide across just to do what I wanted to do, which was design. And I started like with small children's programs and worked my way through to, you know, what I wanted, which was designing films. The initial thing is obviously getting sent a script. Either it's a script from a director I've already worked with and then it's an offer, or it's reading a script in order to be interviewed for that job. Either way, it's the same thing. You read the script and you know, I have obviously, I'm a visual person clearly by what I do. So I immediately start seeing pictures that go with those words on the page. My response to a script is really important to me, because if there isn't much of a response, then it's the wrong script for me to be doing. I do a ton of research, always, always, always. I love that process. But I don't feel you have to adhere to it. I feel it's really important to know as much about the subject. And that's one of the really thrilling things about this job, is you just don't know what world you're going to be digging into next. So, ton of research. And I am very old-fashioned. I photocopy everything and stick all the references on the wall. So it's like this mad wallpaper collage. On a screen, you can't see the world all around you. So I want to be completely surrounded by it. And then it's a very good way of communicating with director, DP, costume designer, and really importantly, my team, what it is that I want to do with that particular piece. So that's like very bottom stage. Obviously interviewing crew, people that I want to work with. Sometimes you have to fill gaps, putting the art department together, starting to scout, having conversations obviously with the director about what's going to be a location, what's going to be a set build. And you know, you're doing all those things pretty much at the same time. I'm sketching, again, I'm very old-fashioned. I draw with a pencil, and I'm scribbling. The minute I see a location, I'll start to draw. And again, that's just, I don't use it as a presentation tool. I use it very much as a communication tool. And then you get into the whole, you know, start of pre-production. It's like a volcanic eruption. It's so quick, and it's so high energy, and it's, you know, pretty insane. It's a rather mad way of earning a living. And once you're designing and making and setting up, I'm very rarely on camera, very, very rarely. I'll always see the director onto a new set, and then I'm off. And I'm often off before the actors even arrive on this. If they're happy and everything's good, then I'm off to do the next one. I always say it's like spinning lots of plates in the air, and I don't have a drawing at the end of the day or a pile of props in the boot of my car or whatever it is. And I kind of just feel I'm sort of just keeping an eye on all the different areas, whether that is, obviously set dressing, obviously construction, obviously props, prop masters, stuff, and vehicles and animals, and you name it, and we're doing it. It's quite a strange thing because I will start with the director at a very early stage, and then the DP will come on a little bit later, and then once you start filming, that really close relationship is really, really removed because they're on camera together, and then that becomes, the really close relationship, and I'm away from it, and that's always quite a sort of gear change. My great collaborator of now, I think it's something ridiculous like 21 films, Tatiana Macdonald, who's my set decorator, and we're very good chums, and we have calculated how many days we've spent together in the last however many years, and it's quite shocking. But it's great because we work together really, really well. We're kind of almost telepathic, so she's an absolutely key person. Then obviously whoever is my supervising art director, and they're the key too, but you also have relationships with the graphic designer and the prop master. It's as I said, you're just spinning all the plates, and you're ducking and diving and making sure that you've got a handle on what everyone's doing. And then, for me, it's incredibly important to have conversations with the DP, with the costume designer, but you have far fewer than you ever want to or should have, because it's such a sort of, it's such a fast process, pre-production. You never have enough time, ever. However good a pre-production time you have, it's never quite enough. So that's why I do this thing of showing references, and from the references I'll then edit those down a little bit, and have we'll have one PDF which is like the mood board for the whole piece, and then that becomes a bit of a sort of Bible, which I will obviously share with other departments. Yeah, there's no set rules for how you do it, and it varies from production to production and relationship to relationship. There are many different types of directors and many different types of designers, and if you think about it, obviously Ken Loach is going to be looking for a completely different designer to Wes Anderson. So they're different. It's different people do different things. My background is theatre. I have a certain sort of theatricality, or what interests me is to give the piece its own identity, I suppose, to set a world that you enter into from the minute you start watching till the last minute. Some of the most visually literate directors, that sounds like all directors are incredibly visually literate, I'm afraid they're not. They're the ones who, once they've made that decision to employ me versus somebody else, they're actually the ones who give one much, 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 much more license to just do it. And I tend, not always, because sometimes you do an interview for a job when you're working on something else, and then you have no time to do any prep, and I turn up woefully underprepared, and I'll get the gig or I won't get it. But if I have time, I will put together some visual images, which is sort of, a director's going to respond to them or not respond to them. And I like to do that. I'm sort of putting my head on the block, but it means that there's, right from the start, you're being very clear about what it is that you would like to do with that piece. And so it's sort of either going to make for a really good collaboration, or it's not. I am opinionated and I am stubborn, and so there's no point in pretending that I'm not. And there's certain things that I will immediately. I mean, I went to the cutting room of The Little Drummer Girl, which Park Chan-wook directed. Amazing, amazing, amazing filmmaker, obviously. And he said to me yesterday, "I am so happy for your decision for us to use brutalist architecture and blocks of colour." And that's a very simple little, I like to sort of set certain boundaries that always come from the reference material. It's not something I would impose onto the piece. It's something that comes from the research. And then I'll have a very strong idea about the colour palette, about the kind of architecture, obviously once those are with conversations with the director, and if they're happy to go ahead with it, then, you know, somebody like Thomas Alfredson or Park Chan-wook, they really let me get on with it, which is the fun bit. The research, the period, the sense of period, that I feel as a designer should be in our DNA. That's almost, it's like obviously you're going to get the period right. Obviously you're going to be looking at character and putting, you know, everything into making sure that everyone's environment feels right for that character. But on top of that is this additional thing, which is, I suppose, creating a visual aesthetic for the film. Tinker Tailor, where we shot in 3 different countries. You're shooting in England, Hungary and Istanbul. Little Drummer Girl, we were in this country, we were in Czech Republic and Greece. You're trying to find, or what I'm trying to do, is find something that binds all those things together visually. Even though you've got completely different sets with completely different character, you're finding something that is somehow going to give that piece its own identity. That's the bit that really interests me. That's not to say I'm not interested in getting period right. That is like taken for granted, you know, in the same way that reading the script and trying to understand a character. And in one interview, John Hurt, it was a very nice thing to hear in an interview. He actually said, I didn't realise how mad my character was in Tinker Tailor until I saw my flat. So, you know, that's what I'm saying. Again, you're working on different levels and it's all in tandem, and it's not like one is more important or less important than another. You're sort of trying to bring all these different strands in together. I'll always read the novel, obviously, and, you know, in the case of Tinker Tailor, what was incredible was that David Cornwell was actually involved with us, and he came and he came and visited us in our production offices. He gave us loads of really amazing information. I mean, you know, things about MI6 that nobody but spies know about. And that was really great to work on. But something like the set in Tinker Tailor, the conference room in that porter cabin and all the offices in porter cabins, that was some crazy thing in my head. That was absolutely nothing to do from research or because no one knows what MI6 looks like. You have to be a bit nutty to do this job. You actually have to be a little bit OCD. You have to be, you know, if you think about it, our job is very creative, but at the same time, we have to deal with budgets and schedules and very specific timelines, which you don't in other creative jobs in the same way. You know, those cost reports that go in every Friday, you know, they have to be on the nose. So what I suppose I'm saying is you have to have this weird left-right brain balance, and it's not an obvious thing, you know. Again, you know, people come from different backgrounds, from architecture or interior or theatre or whatever, and some people make their way up through art departments. There's no way of saying this is the way to do it. What I can say is you have to be passionate, you have to work really bloody hard, because if you're not prepared to do that, someone else is. And, you know, there are much easier ways of making a living. And I was talking to these students and they said to me, I was going through, I was actually doing a sort of breakdown from art department point of view of actually Tinker that we'd screened to them. And I was saying, oh my God, this is when this happened and when that happened. And then it was just one stressful situation after another. And you have to be prepared for that. And you have to be prepared to transplant your life, you know, until the UK bit of The Little Drummer Girl. I hadn't worked in this country for 4 years. And the longest I'd had at home in 2015 in one stretch was 2 weeks. You know, that's a bit mad, really. So passion, it's talent, and it's passion, and it's don't ever feel entitled. I think that's really important. I mean, I think there are lots, this makes me sound like a real old fogey, but I think a lot of young people have a sense of entitlement that can actually stop them from just, you know, going for it. And that thing of just taking every opportunity and making yourself indispensable, and therefore getting yourself noticed, not getting yourself noticed by being loud and shouty, but just by doing a really, really good job. It's obvious. It makes sense, doesn't it?